So even with WWDC only 1 week away, Apple still released iPadOS 15.6 Beta 2 to all developers to try out, to test out, and see if there's anything new with it for us consumers. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So let's get right into this video, everybody. I'm going to put the iPad right here so you guys can follow along with everything that I'm saying. But the very first thing we're going to do is see exactly how big this file size was. So if you guys can see, this is iPadOS 15.6 Developer Beta 2. We're dealing with about 308 megabytes. So give yourselves, 600 to a gig worth of actual storage in order to get this installed correctly. I normally like to double up in terms of empty storage when it comes to updating these things, because at the end of the day, if you don't have enough storage, it's going to kind of break everything and reset you back to where you were. So make sure you have enough storage, because again, we're dealing with about 308 megabytes for this update, which usually 308 megabytes is usually very small, which means we're not going to see too many tangible differences, if any at all. The next thing we're going to mention is the actual build number. So this is 15.6 and we are on model 19G5037D. So what that means is we're getting closer and closer to the final RC edition. Let's see when Apple actually releases it, because I'm not 100% sure, and leave some comments down below if you guys know the history of these releases. But iPadOS 16 is supposed to release, at least the beta version, the day that it gets announced. That's normally how it goes. Now I have seen some leaks that maybe Apple might not push it to developers right away because it's not going to be ready quite yet, because maybe there are some things that are still kind of in testing mode and they need to finalize some things. On stage, they're probably just going to have an MVP, which is a minimal viable product, when kind of displaying all the new features of iPadOS 16. I'm really hoping that iPadOS 16 Beta 1 does release on June 6th. But again, there have been rumors, and this 15.6 beta schedule seems to indicate that we might be going a couple more weeks with 15.6 and then finally get 16.0. But I don't know if they're going to run them in parallel. Let's see exactly what Apple does. And like I mentioned, there aren't too many new features, if at all, with this one. There's nothing tangible. The only visible thing that I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the only real noticeable difference that I saw was inside the wallet application. And now the wallet's a little bit different on the iPad because there isn't a dedicated application. There's just a section in the settings to go to it. But you can see that the Apple Cash Card actually has a little Visa moniker right here. Now that's brand new. That's never been there before. And I think this has to do with Apple kind of separating the actual Apple Card, which is a credit card, by MasterCard, and then you have the Apple Cash Card, which has always been used for cash back or to hold gift card money and things like that, but could be used as real cash. And they're going to make that the debit card, and then they're going to separate the gift card one, or the digital gift card, into a completely different digital card on your actual iPad or on your iPhone. So that's the only new thing that I saw. So you guys can see a little Visa moniker. So they went with Visa on the debit side and then MasterCard on the credit card side. So Apple did release some new watch faces, and in the code they are nicknamed as LilyPad. Again, nothing tangible there. And lastly, there is some mention in HomeKit for support or extended support for Matter accessories. And then lastly, if we go into the actual release notes, you can see that there's only one known issue, and that's that Xcode 13.4 is unable to prepare iOS 15.6 beta devices for development. That has nothing really to do with me. If it does have something to do with you, leave a comment down below what kind of strain it's going to put on your everyday workflow. I'm curious to know if that is actually impacting anybody at a larger scale. And then lastly, if you guys see, whenever I open up one of these shortcuts down here, because you can see that my icons are a different color, they're in this custom icon pack, which I'll link below if you guys want to check it out. But whenever I open something, you see a shortcut drop down come up, which is that little check mark. So I do believe with 15.6, as we move forward, we're going to be able to get rid of that little check mark, because it does give you kind of like a 1 second delay for you to be able to use the application, and it ruins like the customization of it. But again, I think we're going to get rid of that little like drop down notification with the automations inside of shortcuts, which is great to have. And then in terms of performance, with Beta 1, this was the first time in a while where I felt the iPad actually get warm to the touch whenever doing anything. And I wasn't even using it for LumaFusion where it got hot. It was things like YouTube, like a lot of streaming stuff is what really warmed up the iPad, which was kind of the first time that's ever happened. So I'm hoping with Beta 2 that gets alleviated, because that's the only performance issue. It didn't affect the performance at all. It did get warm to the touch, and it made me a little bit worried that maybe the iPad is finally being, it's finally showing its paces and being human in that fact, where it's like, hey, maybe this thing actually does have a little bit of a fault. But let's hope that Beta 2 does alleviate that issue, because I've never had my iPad feel warm, even in like very warm weather and working with intense tasks. And then the last thing I do want to show is if we go into the battery settings, let's see exactly what kind of battery we've been dealing with over the last 10 days. So on a day like Wednesday right here, we got about 2.5 hours of screen on time. Took up almost 75% battery, so again, we probably could have gotten 4 hours of screen on time, but most of it was done on the creative side. So LumaFusion on this day took up about 48%, which was 39 minutes, and Affinity Photo 20%. So there goes almost 70% of my battery, and I only used it for what, maybe an hour and change. And that's, again, task-intensive applications like Affinity Photo, LumaFusion, editing in 4K, editing with multiple layers for a thumbnail and things like that. So again, from a battery standpoint, let's go on a day like Monday, 2 hours and 14 minutes of screen on time. over 75% battery taken up. Again, most of it with LumaFusion and with YouTube. So Apple, I hope they prioritize battery life with iPadOS 16, and maybe we'll get off the beta program if iPadOS 16 does end up being as stable as we want it to be. But expect a release date of probably September for the entire public to get iPadOS and iOS 16. But let's finish up this video and get out of this view. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video, everybody. Like you saw with 15.6 Beta 2, there weren't too many updates, if any, on the front end, right? We didn't see any noticeable changes. The only thing that I could point out was a little glyph inside of the Apple Cash card, which now says Visa. And I think that's part of Apple's new little silo when it comes to doing the credit card, the Apple Cash card, and then finally, I guess, like Apple's gift card or the virtual gift card. So they're breaking it up into 3 different silos. And now I just think Visa is the debit partner for the Apple Cash card. But those are all the changes and differences. Leave some comments down below if you guys noticed anything new, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video. But at this point, I'm just extremely excited for June 6th for WWDC to see exactly what's going on. Because if you guys saw my recent short, apparently we are getting some new level of floating windows and resizable windows. There's going to be like kind of like a desktop mode for the iPad Pro. So let's see what Apple does, and leave a comment down below. Do you think Apple's going to differentiate iPadOS 16 from the higher end iPads or the M1 iPads versus the non-M1s? Because right now in Apple's lineup, it's kind of broken in half. You have the regular iPad 9th gen and then the iPad mini, which have I think the A14 or the A15, but still the 8 series processor. And then you have the iPad Air and then the 11 and 12.9 inch iPad Pros, which now have the M1 chip as of last year and then earlier this year. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Do you think Apple's going to separate them in terms of some operating system features on the A series chips, some other operating system features on the M series chips? Let's see what Apple does. I'm curious to see if they finally do break it, because since 2010, every iPad iteration, no matter what it's modeled or what it's named, the iPad experience has been exactly the same. It's just a matter of how quickly you want things done. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys did enjoy, leave a little dolphin in the comments below so I know that you made it to the very end. And the last thing I'll leave you with is leave a comment down below of what you think Apple's going to wow us with at WWDC. But that's going to do it for this video. Click on one of these if you guys want to keep watching. But I'm out of here. Peace.